The future is not something that happens upon us. It's a consequence of the decisions that we're making.
Welcome back to Heja Framtiden, the Swedish podcast with a sort of Nordic perspective on the future. Today we'll meet Kris Østergaard, Danish co-founder and Chief Learning and Innovation Officer at Singularity U Nordic. He's also helping organizations understand technology and develop their own ability to innovate and be proactive instead of reactive. How can we improve innovation, and what exactly is an exponential organization? My name is Christian von Essen. All information about this podcast is to be found on hejaframtiden.se. Follow us on social media, follow us on the podcast platforms, and support us on Patreon if you like. This episode is produced in collaboration with the Warp Institute and Singularity U Nordic Summit. Thank you so much for having us. And now let's get to meet Kris Østergaard. All right. Welcome, Kris Østergaard, to Heja Framtiden.
Thank you for having me.
You are co-founder and Chief Learning and Innovation Officer at Singularity U Nordic.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You're also faculty member of Singularity University.
Yes.
Your expertise is in leading transformation in times of exponential technological growth. Can you say that?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a very big part of it. I specialize in and have looked into corporate innovation a lot, and particularly how to think about and how to design for innovation in large established companies, what we sometimes call legacy organizations.
And why is innovation so difficult for them?
Yeah, I mean, I often like to say when I speak to these large corporates that when it comes to large corporates and innovation, there's sort of good news and bad news. And the bad news is that, as you say, innovation is much harder for them than it is for a startup. Because they are much more complex organization, they're a much more complex machine, they have so much more going on than a startup that at least for a very long time it has like one focus, one job, and then just go execute. It's much more complex in a large organization. But the good news, however, is that no one really has a better chance of succeeding than the large established corporation. Because what they also have is all the resources. They have money, they have customers, they have data, they have suppliers, they have infrastructure. They have all of that stuff that startups really don't. I mean, so there's like really no logical reason for why it shouldn't be the already established corporation that is ahead of the curve in terms of innovation. What it comes down to is design, really, and mindset, is how we think about innovation and how the large companies then go and design for it to make it happen.
When you say design, do you mean that in a broader sense?
I mean that in a broader sense. I mean, what strategies do they lay out in terms of the purpose and the goal of the organization, and how do they then go and look internally in terms of how can we achieve this, and how can we continue to innovate or upgrade our innovations in terms of remain relevant, increase our relevance, ensure that we don't become irrelevant.
Kyle Nell, who was the speaker after you today, he mentioned that talents who want to be innovative in a large organization often tend to get frustrated and they leave and they become competitors.
Yep.
Why is it so difficult to keep these talents and keep them on top of things and utilize their innovation and their ideas? Do you need to build a framework for that, or a culture?
Yeah, I mean, culture is key, and I sometimes like to say that culture may be the hard problem in terms of innovation, and less so technologies or how to apply technologies. And that's because in most large corporations, what they have really is what you can call a status quo culture. And we all, as human beings, have a lot of biases, And one of our biases, and we all have that, is the status quo bias. And the status quo bias means that we are hardwired to a preference for rather not losing than winning.
Okay.
And rather not losing than winning means that that is a more reactive way of being in the world. So if we are to talk about innovation, if we are to talk about transformation, all of this are very proactive activities. And that means if you are to bring people on that journey, the incentive needs to be very clear for people. And very often that incentive is not clear at all for people in large established organizations. So there's, like, you can say, a construction problem, which is, why should I go on this journey with the organization unless the organization makes that very clear? And that means that the organization then needs to gear its system for innovation. It's much less about human beings' lack of willingness for change, and it's much more about how can we design our system, our organization, to actually be ready and to fertilize innovation and not just talk about it. That is stuff like, for instance, our KPIs. What is it that we're measuring? What is it that we're rewarding in our organizations? Often we talk about innovation, but our metrics remain the same. And that means we're being measured on the same, we get our bonuses on the same, we get evaluated based off of the same metrics. And that is a disconnect.
And you talk about the exponential organization. What do you mean by that?
Well, the exponential organizations is not my term. It's a term from a guy called Salim Ismail, who wrote a book about it, him and a couple of co-authors. And exponential organizations is, they define as companies that have a minimum 10x impact or output compared to more traditional companies. So it's the very fast-getting companies of the world, the Airbnbs, the Googles, the Teslas, etc., that have been doing a lot of different things and are all based out of digitization, which is a key parameter for them being able to scale at such a fast pace. And they are a certain type of organization. And there's a lot to learn from those organizations as a large established legacy company. There's also stuff that is very different. And back to the notion why innovation is much harder for these large established companies, because they have all this baggage, all this history, all this many years, sometimes hundreds even of years of ways of doing things.
Yeah, and the culture may be tradition rather than innovation.
Yes.
But and some try to solve this problem by purchasing smaller hip firms and turn them into innovation labs. Kynell was making fun of that. What do you think? Does that not work?
It depends. I mean, I think there's a lot of different innovation initiatives that you can take, and most of them can make sense, but never if they're standalone initiatives. And that is what we often see happening, and what I think that Kyle was also referencing to. If you build an innovation lab, and that is sort of your initiative as an organization, now we build this innovation lab, now we wait for magic to happen, that most likely will fail. Right? Because it's not part of a bigger strategic move for the organization. That's back to what I mean about designing for innovation. What's the strategy here? What's the purpose? How do we really think ambitiously enough, strategically enough, long-term enough around how we actually turn our company into an innovation engine that not only does the usual innovations, that the product developments that they're really, really good at, and they need to continue to do those because it's what pays the rent. But they also need to augment the organization, meaning they need to upgrade from analog to digital, to mobile first, to AI first, whatever it is. There will continuously be that need to upgrade the core of the company. And then they need to challenge the core as well, which is what I call mutating innovations, which is where you go in and make more radical experiments to learn for the long term. Who might you be 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the road? In order to figure that out, you need to start today experimenting with new models.
And you've also been working a lot with customer experience. I talked to Laila yesterday, whom you've been working with a lot. How is the customer experience different today than it used to be?
Well, I think customer demand is much higher now than it's ever been, and probably will continue to move in that direction. We are increasingly accustomed to a extremely high degree of customization, of instant feedback, instant pleasure, of super high convenience. And we will continue to want that and continue to desire that. And that is what, the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world have figured out to a large extent and are continuously working towards trying to provide for customers to the degree where they can, provide what the customer wants before the customer knows that they want it.
Yeah, because sometimes it feels like all this data that is gathered about the customers is being translated into programmatic advertising, and that's it. So you get more interactions with the company, but that's not exactly what you want. You want more value.
Absolutely, and in a sense, advertising can give value to you if it provides you with opportunities that you're interested in, and all of these companies are trying to learn that, and then they're harvesting data also to figure out to anticipate your needs and be able to provide those solutions that you want or think that you want for you. And of course that raises a whole bunch of ethical questions, and in terms of privacy and in terms of who owns our data, and should the companies be allowed to harvest our data and without us knowing it, and we see a lot of that discussion happening now, and it's also time that it's happening because it's Wild West in many ways, and we need some much more clearer rules, I think, and much more transparency as for anyone as an individual person in terms of what is known about me, how do I share, and what is my own voice in that.
You had an example where you sort of compared organizations to the immune system. Is that a part of the status quo example that you were talking about?
I mean, so the term corporate immune system is a Silicon Valley term that is often referred to when we experience issues with companies not changing. And I'm currently writing a book that's out early next year where I'm exploring that into much more depth, because it's always struck me that when we were speaking, or when people are speaking about the immune system, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. So it's a lot of, it's top management that don't want change, or middle management that don't want change, or the employees that don't want change. And of course there's human resistance to change. That is a real thing. But an even bigger problem is the organizational immune system. So there's the individual layer, an individual immune system, but the organizational immune system, which is the system, if you like, which is our KPIs, which is our existing IT infrastructures, our existing business models, our existing regulatory systems, etc., all of that is much more important in terms of being barriers towards innovation. And if you take the system up against the people, the system will always win in a corporate context. So that means that we often see companies who kickstart innovation initiatives or digital transformation projects or something to that degree. But what they don't do is that they actually change and transform the system to adapt to this. So that means that they, for instance, hold on to their existing KPIs, even though they're communicating we need to disrupt ourselves or be more innovative or invent something new, or whatever the language that they're using. And that's a paradox. It's a clash. And that means, so whatever we're still measuring, that will win out. And therefore we will fail.
And do organizations like Singularity University, do they have a responsibility in sort of lifting this agenda for executives and CEOs?
Well, our purpose as Singularity University, as Singularity U Nordic, operating here out of the Nordic countries, is to help not just executives, but all people get a better understanding of technological development and where we're heading because of that technological development, or where we could be heading, because the future is not something that happens upon us. It's a consequence of the decisions that we're making. And we see a part of our responsibility to be to take that knowledge and, yes, help companies make better business, but more importantly, I think, help us use these technologies to solve the really big, important problems in the world, to help us also move into creating the societies that we want to see for the future. And if we're able to do that, that, by the way, is also good business, but it also serves a bigger purpose.
So it's not necessarily on an executive level, it's also on a political level.
It's on a political level. It's also on a next generation level. I mean, we're very engaged in supporting entrepreneurs and supporting students. We have hosting here a big 2-day conference at the waterfront in Stockholm. 10% are students here who have gotten free tickets. 10% are entrepreneurs who have gotten free tickets with help from our partners. And next year we're planning to host a huge student summit for between 5,000 to 10,000 students that we're doing completely free of charge, because it's important also to share this knowledge and information with the next generation, who are obviously the ones who have to build the future.
Which brings us to the educational aspect of it. You work as a Chief Learning and Innovation Officer. How do you see the education transforming in these times? Do you have a different approach?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that we approach education is very much from a lifelong learning perspective. So what the trends that we are seeing is that in a rapidly changing world, everybody's need for continuous learning and continuously upgrading their competencies and their expertises is increasing. One, to just remain knowledgeable within your own domain, but also because technologies are converging, melding together, as our industries needs that we also not only need to upgrade ourselves in our own expertises, but we also need to be broader. We all need to have a more generalist perspective, and therefore we need to explore new venues, and we need to continue to learn. And that sort of challenges the traditional education model, which is going to school for 10, 15 years, then going to university for 5 years, then doing a PhD, if you do that. And I think the PhD we will still need for those that need to be doing basic research, for instance. But what we are seeing challenge is, your master's degrees and your bachelor's degrees and even your 2-year MBAs. It's simply too long time to take out of your calendar, rather than doing much more focused education for much shorter periods of time, but very intense, and then can do continuously versions of that over time, depending on your needs. And this is, I think, where we are providing value.
Okay. And your book is out in spring of 2019?
Yes.
Hopefully, yeah. And do you have other reading tips?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I read everything I can get my hands on, and it's a way that I try to keep updated. I highly encourage everybody to read a book called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. He's speaking at our summit here. He's a Harvard professor and one of the world's great thinkers. And what is special about this book is that he very rigorously documents how the world, in fact, is getting better on a wide variety of subjects, and has been for most of history, really, because of the Enlightenment, meaning because of education, because of innovation. That does not mean there isn't problems in the world. There certainly are, but technology is also our tools to solve those problems. And I think the media serves a different picture, and it's all the doom and gloom. And it's very important that we also remain focused on a nuanced picture, and that in fact is well documented that the world is in fact becoming a better place. And I think we need that optimism in our worlds also, to be motivated towards going out and participating and taking that step where we are parts of building the future that we want to see.
That's a good ending note, I think. Thank you so much, Kris Østergaard.
Pleasure.
To join our movement, please check out hejaframtiden.se and check out Singularity U Nordic for more information, and join the summit next year. My name is Christian von Essen. Thank you for listening.